There are corners of America you physically cannot drive to. Not on any highway, not down any back road, not in any vehicle ever built, no matter how hard you try. Some are sealed off by canyon walls a mile deep. Some sit behind 1,000 miles of open ocean. And one of them is an entire state capital, more than 30,000 people, with no road connecting it to the rest of the country at all. Today, we're counting down the most remote places in America you can't drive to, from a town where the only way in is to leave the country first, all the way to the single most isolated spot in the entire United States. And each one is harder to reach than the last. There's a town on this list where your mail still arrives by mule, carried 8 miles down into the Grand Canyon. Number 4 is a settlement that was deliberately sealed off from the world behind the tallest sea cliffs on the planet. Number 7 was a Cold War town built for 6,000 people. Today, fewer than 200 remain, and the tundra is quietly swallowing the empty suburbs. And the final place is so far from any road, town, or airstrip that the last permanent residents weren't people at all. They were a herd of reindeer, and every single one of them is now dead. But let's start with number 1. A piece of American soil where all the roads lead the wrong way. To reach it by car, an American has to do something strange. Leave the United States entirely. Look at a map of the Pacific Northwest, right where Washington State meets Canada, and you'll find a small square of land dangling below the city of Vancouver. That square is Point Roberts, Washington. It is fully, legally, 100% part of the United States. American flags, American zip code, American sheriff. And you cannot drive to it from the rest of America without leaving the country. Here's why. Back in 1846, Britain and the United States settled their border along the 49th parallel, a straight line drawn across the map. Nobody realized, or nobody cared, that this tidy line clipped off the very tip of a peninsula that hangs down from what is now British Columbia. Everything above the line went to Canada. This 5 square mile thumb below it stayed American, but the only land attached to it is Canadian. So if you live in Point Roberts and you want to drive to the nearest American town, you cross into Canada, drive north through Canadian suburbs, then cross back into the United States about 25 miles later. 4 international border checkpoints for a trip to the mainland. The local kids have it worst of all. Point Roberts has an elementary school, but no high school. So every teenager on the point rides a bus across 2 international borders, twice a day, just to get to class in the town of Blaine. It's an entire American community, living behind someone else's front door. The roads are all there, smooth, paved, ordinary American streets. They just don't connect to the country they belong to. And believe it or not, that makes Point Roberts the easiest place on this list to reach. From here, it only gets harder. Now here's one that surprises almost everyone. You'd expect the places you can't drive to in America to be tiny. A cabin, a lighthouse, a dot in the wilderness. So what if I told you that one of them is a state capital? A working city of more than 30,000 people, with government buildings, a cruise ship port, traffic lights, and cul-de-sacs, and not a single road connecting it to the rest of North America. This is Juneau, the capital of Alaska, and it is the only state capital in the United States that you cannot drive to. There is no highway in. There is no highway out. If you're standing in downtown Juneau and you want to reach Anchorage, another Alaskan city, you cannot make that drive. It is physically impossible. The reason is the land itself. Juneau is pinned against the coast between the frigid waters of the Gastineau Channel and the Juneau Icefield, a vast, crushing sheet of ice and near-vertical coast mountains that has never been crossed by a road. To get to Juneau, you fly or you take the ferry. That's it. Cars arrive in Juneau the same way people do, loaded onto a boat. For decades, Alaskans have argued about building a road to their own capital. Plans have been drawn, funded, canceled, redrawn, and canceled again. The terrain is brutal, the avalanche danger is constant, and the cost is enormous. So the capital of the largest state in America remains an island in every way that matters. A city you can see, walk through, and live in, but can never once drive home from. And Juneau, remember, has 30,000 people. Our next stop has about 200. Deep inside the Grand Canyon, far below the rim where the tour buses stop, there is a village that the modern world almost forgot. It's called Supai, and it is the most remote community in the lower 48 states. No road reaches it. No road has ever reached it. And to this day, it is the only place left in the United States where the mail is delivered by mule. Supai is the capital of the Havasupai, the people of the blue-green water, who have lived in this side canyon for centuries. To get there, you park at a spot called Hualapai Hilltop at the literal end of the road, and then you walk 8 miles down a dust and switchback trail, dropping thousands of feet into the canyon until the red rock opens up and a village of a couple hundred people appears beside a turquoise creek. There are no cars in Supai because there is nowhere for a car to go. Everything the village needs, groceries, furniture, building supplies, and yes, the Daily Mail, is loaded onto pack mules at the top and led down that same 8-mile trail. The Postal Service runs it as an official route, mule trains hauling letters and packages down into the canyon and carrying the outgoing mail back up. It is the last mule train mail route in America, and it exists for one simple reason: there is no other way in. What makes Supai extraordinary isn't just the isolation, it's that it's a living, breathing town in the most visited canyon on Earth, and almost nobody up on the rim knows it's there. But at least you can walk to Supai. Our next place spent 100 years making sure no one could. On the Hawaiian island of Molokai, there is a small, flat peninsula that juts out into the Pacific. Green, beautiful, and completely cut off from the rest of the island by a wall. Not a man-made wall, a wall of cliffs. The sea cliffs that seal off the Kalaupapa Peninsula are among the tallest in the entire world, rising well over 2,000 feet of sheer, near vertical rock straight up from the shoreline. And that wall was the entire point, because in 1866 the Kingdom of Hawaii chose this place precisely because it was impossible to leave. Kalaupapa became a place of exile, a settlement for people diagnosed with leprosy, the disease now known as Hansen's disease. Terrified of contagion, the authorities rounded up the sick and shipped them here, dropping them on the peninsula, walled off by ocean on 3 sides and by those colossal cliffs on the 4th. Over the following century, roughly 8,000 people were banished to Kalaupapa. Most of them would never leave. There was never a road in, and there never will be. Even today, you can reach Kalaupapa only 3 ways: a small plane onto a tiny airstrip, a boat, or a single mule trail that switchbacks down the cliff face. 3 miles of trail, 26 hairpin turns, clinging to a wall of rock. It was down that trail, and to this community of the outcast, that a Belgian priest named Father Damien came in 1873. He lived among the patients, built their homes and their church, and eventually contracted the disease himself, dying at Kalaupapa in 1889. He is a saint today. The forced isolation finally ended in 1969, but a few of the former patients chose to stay, living out their lives in the one place the world had allowed them. Kalaupapa was built to be unreachable, and more than 150 years later, it still is. We tend to think of the wild, roadless places as belonging to Alaska or the far west, but there's one hiding in the middle of the country, in the Great Lakes, and it holds a strange record. It is the least visited national park in the entire contiguous United States. Some years, more people visit a busy park like the Grand Canyon in a single day than visit this place in a whole year. This is Isle Royale, a long, wild island sitting in the cold, deep waters of Lake Superior. It belongs to Michigan, though it's actually closer to Canada, and it is about as far from a road as you can get in the lower 48. In fact, one point on the island, Point Houghton, sits more than 26 miles from the nearest road of any kind. One of the most road-remote spots in the contiguous US, and it's on an island in a lake. Getting there is a commitment. There is no bridge and no car ferry for tourists. You arrive by passenger ferry or seaplane across open, frigid water, and then you're on foot. And here's the part that makes Isle Royale unlike almost any other national park in America. For nearly half the year, it closes completely. From early November through mid-April, the park shuts down and the island is abandoned to the winter. No rangers, no visitors, nobody. That total isolation turned Isle Royale into one of the most famous natural laboratories on Earth. Cut off by the lake, its wolves and moose have been locked in a predator and prey struggle that scientists have studied continuously for more than 60 years, the longest study of its kind anywhere. It's a whole world sealed inside a lake. And from here, the places only get lonelier. So where, exactly, is the single most remote spot in the lower 48? The one place in the continental United States where you are farthest from any road. To find it, you go to the far southeastern corner of Yellowstone, into a region with an almost ironic name, the Thorofare. A thoroughfare is supposed to mean a route, a way through, but there is nothing quick about this place. The thoroughfare is the piece of ground in the contiguous United States that lies farther from a road than any other. From the nearest trailhead, reaching its heart means traveling somewhere on the order of 30 miles into the backcountry, a journey most people make on horseback over multiple days because there is simply no faster way. No road comes close. No cell signal reaches any peak in the area. If something goes wrong out here, your only way out is a helicopter, and only if the weather lets it fly. The one and only permanent human structure in all that emptiness is a lonely log cabin, the Thorofare Ranger Station, first built here over a century ago and rebuilt in 1937 after a fire. A ranger still staffs it in the warm months. It has been called the most remote occupied dwelling in the lower 48. A single cabin, days from the nearest road, in an ocean of wilderness. And this is prime grizzly country. The Thorofare has one of the densest grizzly bear populations anywhere in the continental US, drawn by the spawning trout and the sheer absence of people. It is, in every sense, the deepest you can get into the wild without leaving the lower 48. But now we leave the lower 48 behind, because everything up to this point was just the warm-up. Fly 2 hours west of Anchorage, out along the great curving chain of the Aleutian Islands, and you eventually reach the westernmost town in the United States. Keep going past it, and you'd cross the international dateline before you'd hit another American community. This is Adak, and walking through it today feels like walking through the end of the world. Because Adak is a town built for thousands, now nearly empty, during the Cold War, this remote, treeless, wind-scoured island was one of the most strategically important places in America. A frontline Navy and Coast Guard base staring straight across the North Pacific at the Soviet Union. At its peak, more than 6,000 people lived here. There were schools, a bowling alley, a McDonald's, whole neighborhoods of family housing laid out in tidy suburban streets. Then, in 1997, the Navy left, and almost overnight, a town of 6,000 began to empty out. Today, Adak's population is fewer than 200 people, rattling around inside the shell of a city built for 30 times that many. Entire suburbs stand abandoned, rows of empty houses with the windows blown out, furniture still inside, the paint peeling, the roads cracking, and the tundra creeping back over all of it. It is one of the eeriest inhabited places in America. Getting there hasn't gotten any easier. Adak sits roughly 1,200 miles southwest of Anchorage, and the only scheduled way in is an Alaska Airlines flight that runs just twice a week, weather permitting. And out here, the weather permits very little. Miss your flight, and you might be waiting days. Adak is proof that in America's most remote corners, the wilderness doesn't just keep people out. Sometimes, it takes the town back. If Adak is a place people left, our next stop is a place people never really settled at all. A wilderness so vast and so untouched that it makes every other park in America look crowded. It is the least visited national park in the entire United States, and it's not close. In a typical year, this park sees around 10,000 visitors. Fewer people in 12 months than Yellowstone can see before lunch on a summer day. This is Gates of the Arctic, in the far north of Alaska, lying entirely above the Arctic Circle. It is bigger than the country of Belgium. And here's the thing that defines it. There are no roads. Not one. There are also no trails, no campgrounds, no visitor facilities, no signs, no marked routes of any kind, anywhere in its 8.5 million acres. The Park Service builds nothing here on purpose. The whole point is that it stays exactly as it has always been. So how do you visit a park with no roads and no trails? You charter a small bush plane, and a pilot drops you on a gravel river bar or a lake in the middle of nowhere, and then flies away. From that moment, you are on your own, navigating raw tundra and river valleys with no path to follow and no one to call. When your time is up, the plane comes back to the same spot, you hope, and picks you up. There are no crowds in Gates of the Arctic because getting here takes real effort, real money, and real risk. It is one of the last places in America where you can stand somewhere that quite possibly no human being has ever stood before. And yet, it's still not the most remote place on this list. For that, we have to go out to sea. Now we leave the continent completely. About 1,000 miles due south of Hawaii, alone in the vast emptiness of the Central Pacific, there is a ring of tiny coral islets that flies the American flag. This is Palmyra Atoll, a genuine piece of United States territory, closer to the equator than to any American city, with no permanent population and a very dark past. Palmyra has no town, no residence, no hotel, no scheduled anything. The only people here are a small rotating team of scientists and conservation staff, and the only ways to reach it are a private boat willing to make a multi-day open ocean crossing or a chartered small plane landing on a single old coral airstrip left over from World War II. There is no other way. You cannot buy a ticket to Palmyra. For practical purposes, almost no one on Earth will ever set foot on it, and that isolation has a sinister history. In 1974, an American couple, Mac and Muff Graham, sailed their yacht to Palmyra and anchored in the lagoon. So did another couple, a drifter and his girlfriend. Only 2 of those 4 people would leave the atoll alive. Muff Graham's remains were discovered years later, and the case became one of the most infamous murder mysteries in American history, later immortalized in the book And the Sea Will Tell. On an island this remote, there are no witnesses. There is no one to hear anything at all. Today, Palmyra is a protected wildlife refuge, home to millions of seabirds and one of the healthiest coral reef systems left on the planet, a paradise and a warning. But it's still not the loneliest place under the American flag. There is one place even more cut off than this, and nobody lives there at all. Far out in the Bering Sea, halfway to Russia, there is an island that no one owns, no one lives on, and almost no one has ever seen with their own eyes. It has no town, it has no airstrip, it has no road, no cabin, no dock, nothing. And it holds the ultimate title on this list. St. Matthew Island is the single most remote place in the entire United States. Geographers have actually measured this. St. Matthew sits roughly 209 miles from the nearest human settlement, a tiny village on another island, itself already in the middle of nowhere. There is more open, empty distance between St. Matthew and the nearest person than almost anywhere else on the map of America. Even scientists studying it might visit only once in many years. Most years, not a single human being sets foot on it. But here's the haunting part, the reason this island is remembered at all. In 1944, during the war, the Coast Guard set up a small outpost here, and, to leave the men a backup food source, released 29 reindeer onto the island. Then, the war ended, the outpost closed, and the men left. The reindeer stayed. And on an island with rich lichen, no predators, and no one to hunt them, they multiplied and multiplied. By 1963, those 29 reindeer had exploded into a herd of roughly 6,000. Thousands of animals blanketing a treeless island in the middle of the Bering Sea, but they had eaten through the lichen faster than it could ever grow back. And then came the winter of 1963 into 1964. Brutal, deep, and merciless. With their food gone and the snow piled high, the herd collapsed. Not slowly, all at once. When researchers returned, they found the island littered with thousands of skeletons. Out of 6,000 animals, 42 were left alive. And within a couple of decades, even those were gone. 29 to 6,000 to 0. Today, St. Matthew is silent again. Wind, grass, sea cliffs, and the bones. It is a place so far from the rest of us that a whole population of animals lived, boomed, starved, and vanished completely, and no human was there to see any of it happen. That is what true remoteness means. Not a hard drive, not a long hike, a place the modern world simply cannot reach, and mostly doesn't try. What's strange about this whole list is what it says about America. We think of it as a country you can drive across end to end, a nation of highways and gas stations and open road, and you almost can. But tucked into the corners of it are these pockets the road never reached. A state capital boxed in by ice, a village that gets its mail by mule, an island where 6,000 animals died alone in the dark. The map looks finished. It isn't. There are still blank spots out there, and some of them are closer than you'd think. So I'm curious, which of these would you actually want to visit? The mule trail down to Supai? The empty streets of Adak? Or would you rather these places stay exactly as they are, far away and left alone? Let me know down in the comments. If you enjoyed this one, go check out the video on screen right now. You'll like it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.